Welcome to the Bookistrator, where I share the stories I love through illustration. Today I have a very special book to talk about, one that's come to mean a lot to me, and I hope will mean a lot to any of you who end up reading it. The book is called Forestborn by Elayne Audrey Becker. This is a young adult fantasy novel filled with shapeshifters, giants, and horrible magic disease, and phenomenal characters. This was in my top 5 best books I read in 2023, and I'm so excited to talk about it with you all today. Let's get into the illustration. As I said in the intro a moment ago, I loved this book, and its sequel Wildbound was incredible as well. But I wanted to say right here at the beginning that this video will not be the last time you see these characters or hear me talk about this book. I've been in touch with Elayne, the author, and we've been coming up with cool ideas for a larger project that will hopefully someday soon make it onto this channel. Until then, you get this straightforward character lineup. Confession time. This is usually what I want to draw for these Bookistrator videos, but I try to limit myself to only drawing the characters infrequently. I figured you guys would probably get bored and that the channel would look redundant, but if I could choose, I would only draw characters with white backgrounds. I love drawing people and making the characters I've fallen in love with into real depictions. The other pieces I'll do for these books will be more complex, and I'll have a lot more to talk about art-wise with those. But as soon as I finished that first book, I desperately needed to draw these characters out. So, who are these people? What is this book about? Here's the synopsis as I see it. Rora is a shifter. She can take the form of 3 different animals: a lynx, a mouse, and a goshawk. These forms manifested during times of great stress in her life, a way to fight back, hide, or escape the dangers surrounding her. Rora and her brother Helos live at the king's mercy in the country of Elayne. People with magic in their veins are feared here, so they both keep their abilities secret amongst the populace. The only person who doesn't find them dangerous is Finley, the youngest prince. He is Rora and Helos' best friend, and the one they can be their true selves around. Rora works as a spy for the king, using her shifting to keep an eye on potential uprisings and the spread of the magical disease that has taken yet another life. A sickness that the populace of the kingdom is now blaming on magical folk like Rora. Returning with this news to the king and the rest of the royals, Rora's horrified to learn that Finley is sick with the very illness she's been tracking. He's in the early stages of the disease, but each person afflicted with it progresses differently. The only thing they know for sure is that everyone who gets it dies. Rora, her brother Helos, and the elder prince Weslin embark on a dangerous journey to the land of Vale, a place swarming with magical creatures, a shifting landscape, and the giants that could hold the key to saving not only Finley, but the rest of the people in the 3 kingdoms dying from the magical sickness. It'll be a hard journey, but Rora and Helos know the area well, as they fled that place only a few years before. Rora is the girl in this illustration that I started drawing first. Elayne does a great job of giving you concrete descriptions of all of her characters, so I had a super easy time figuring out how to draw them in a way that felt faithful to their details. Rora and her brother Helos are described as tall and lean. They are a little darker skinned than the royal family and also have dark hair. The trio are given nice gray cloaks at the beginning of their journey, and Rora is often described wearing an olive green shirt and practical clothes. To her right is Helos, Rora's steadfast, hard-working older brother. He doesn't use his abilities as a shifter for the king. Instead, he apprentices at a local apothecary. Helos is a healer, a leader, and a kind soul who only wants the best for people. He and Rora had a difficult childhood in the Vale, witnessing horrific sights and barely making it out alive. He finds a lot more joy and fulfillment living amongst people in the city and craves the crowded life. He and Rora are like the sun and moon. He, the bright and life-giving person people gravitate towards, while Rora lives in the shadows, hiding behind other people's faces and living in isolation. I wanted to make sure these 2 looked like siblings, which will be more obvious when I get to the colors, so I gave them the same eye shapes and the same nose. Next, I jump over to Finley, the charming prince who likes to dream and draw and goof off with the shifter siblings. Finley is mischievous and fun, a joy to all who know him. He's the tether that keep our journeying trio moving forward. All 3 of them love him and are willing to do anything to keep him from dying at only 16 years old. Finley was the one who welcomed Rora, the one who can make her smile, her only friend besides her brother. For Helos, Finley is more complicated. They haven't been speaking for the last few months, and Helos has been banned from entering the castle. But Helos still drops everything to go in search of a cure. To Westlin, Finley is incredible. His precious little brother he would do anything for. I wish so bad we got a POV from Finn, as I really like him as a character. I struggled for a while here on Helos' hair. It's described as almost shoulder length in the book, and I always pictured it brushed back. But when I tried a few things, I ended up liking it parted, with a bit of hair hanging down on one side, kind of mirroring Rora's. Then I took another crack at Finley's face. He looked too feminine, I guess. I pictured him sharper, not as round-faced, which you saw in that quick little doodle. So we're starting over, even though I liked his expression. Finn is described with wispy, wavy hair that kind of halos his face. He has freckles and is pale and very thin. While I liked that earlier expression, this worked better for me. The sharper lines felt more Finley-like, and his eyes are saying he's definitely up to something. Just like with Helos, I go a few rounds before I find his hairstyle. Does that make sense? Have you ever felt like you were looking for something as you draw? Maybe it would make more sense if I explained it like this. You have an idea in your head of what a character looks like when you read about them, right? Even if it's not specifically stated what kind of hairstyle they have, what you draw can feel right or wrong based on how close you are to that gut feeling of correctness. Or at least that's how it feels to me. I knew his hair would have more volume, it would be messier, and curl more, so I started drawing over and tossing things in and out. Finally, I felt like I had Finley looking back at me. To Rora's left is Westlin, the middle child of the royal family and Finley's brother. He's a few years older than Rora, who is probably 17 or 18. The oldest royal sibling, Violet, has been trained to be the heir to the throne their whole lives. So Westlin was needed as a soldier and commander. He's stern and practical, and Rora is positive that he hates her. It could be because she's a shifter. It could be because the day she and her brother arrived in the kingdom, the queen died. It could be because of a prophecy read out every year in each kingdom. 2 shifters' death. This prediction has haunted Rora and Helos for years and is the main reason they keep their identities secret from most people. It could be one or more of these reasons that Westlin always seems to be keeping a cold eye on her. Wes is described with more militaristic clothing, well kept but simple. He also has broad shoulders, a trim waist, reddish-brown hair, and a close cropped beard. I hate drawing beards. I don't draw them enough to be used to how they work and lay on the face, so my inexperience is definitely showing here. But I'll come back to that later. As I'm watching this playback while I write the script here, I remember how much I struggled with each of these boys. Rora's the only one who came out smoothly with no issue. Maybe it's because I had such a solid idea in my head of what she looked like before I started working on this, but more likely it's because she's a girl. I draw a lot more women than men, so I have more practice drawing them. She also doesn't have a beard, thank goodness. With a few nitpicks of her face and neck area, I add Wes's arm and move on to Helos' body and clothes. He's not rich, but I imagine he takes good care of his clothing. A simple tunic-looking shirt tied at the front made sense to me, with breeches and a tie at the waist. I mentioned talking to Elayne Becker at the beginning of this video, and I wanted to share a bit of that story here. I reached out to her on Instagram's direct messages and asked her if she ever got fan art of her book, what would she want to see? Ultimately, our desires aligned, and I made this simple character lineup. There's something so exciting to me about seeing artists depict book characters I love, especially if I agree with how they chose to draw them, particularly if it's their characters. I hope that any authors that see my book fan art like them. I try really hard to get them as book accurate as possible, but you never know what other people will think of the choices you make. I did have an awesome time when I posted this piece on my Instagram a while back. Elayne was so sweet and really seemed to enjoy how I drew these guys. That made me really happy and proud of what I've done. You're welcome to go see that interaction on my page if you want. The thing that touched me the most about this experience, however, was when I sent the actual file to Elayne. She got it printed and has it sitting on her desk where she writes. How insane is that? I have a picture of my painting sitting on the desk of the author who wrote the book this piece was inspired by. That's wild. It's been one of the best parts about working on all these videos since 2023, getting to interact with some of the authors, who are all just the nicest. I highly recommend just reaching out to the people you admire. It can be intimidating, but just try it. The worst that can happen is that they don't respond, and who knows, you may make a friend out of it. The next step in this process is flat coloring. I did a chunky wash of paint on each character and gave them all their own layers to make sure coloring them would go smoothly. The colors I chose here are arbitrary. I just needed to get something down so that I could lock the layers in Photoshop and paint on top without anything slipping outside of the line art. Have you ever tried doing it that way? I highly recommend it. It saved me a lot of time now that I'm primarily a digital illustrator. With that done, I then changed each color to be what I imagined their skin tone. Rora and Helos are described as more olivey in skin tone, while the royal brothers are either tan or pale. But they're all white, just varying shades. And now we're on to the flat colors. This is where I make the decisions about hair and clothing. I look for any hints in the book. But if nothing is specified, I usually go with my gut. This can be choosing something I think a character would wear based on what I know about them, or on what would look good in the painting as a whole. And oh, thank goodness, adding color to Westland's beard made it look less atrocious. It's still a little wonky, but that's pretty much as good as it's gonna get. I realized I haven't mentioned anything about Finley's clothes yet. He's a prince, so he has nice clothing. But unlike his siblings, he's not very orderly or neat. He's often described with his tie untied, his shirt untucked, his hair messy, so I just had to add those little details. I even have the buttons on his wrist undone. Our perfect little chaos gremlin is here. Next, I color the line art. None of these steps are necessary, of course, but things I've learned I like to add over the years of making art. Coloring the line art to me is the extra little step that makes a piece feel more completed. It softens edges, brings out contrast, or moves things into the background. My rule of thumb is that exterior line art, anything on the outside lines of the character, are darker than the interior ones. This gives things a more solid outline while maintaining that softer interior I love so much. Of course, it would probably be easier if I set the line art layers to multiply or some other layer filter that would color the lines for me, and so much faster, but it never looks as good as when I do it all myself. To me, anyway. I can choose how hard or soft or saturated or bright something is going to be that Photoshop just can't emulate in layer styles. Now I'm adding hatching. This isn't to indicate form, but rather to add some much needed texture. I like the clean, flat digital look as much as anybody, but my roots are firmly planted in watercolor and graphite. I like that human-made touch, and adding these texture lines is enough for me in a simple piece like this. I draw the lines, then lock the layer and use the color drop tool to grab a color similar to the one underneath. Then I make it a little darker or lighter, so it's more subtle than it was initially. I don't want these lines to be the first thing you notice, more like supporting music in the background. Finally, we're on to details. Highlights here and there, blush and some shadows. I'm going with a more sketch look for this piece, so nothing is going to be very rendered. I even keep those initial underdrawing sketch lines in the background. Those blue ones that you can see around the characters. I love seeing hints of how the piece started in art I admire, so I try to keep those lines interact when I do these simple white background pieces. I do fidget a bit back and forth here about how much form lighting I'm going to add to their clothes. I end up keeping it pretty subtle, as I like flat illustrations. We're getting pretty close to the end of this speed draw, so I wanted to share a few last things about this incredible book. Forestborn is the first in a duology, the sequel being Wildbound. Forestborn is a desperate race to save a loved one from a disease no one understands. It's a love letter to nature and a shout to stand up for our planet. It's a story about being an outcast for all four of our characters here, but in different ways. It's a book I felt seen in, and I wish so badly I could have read it as a teenager. Rora is such a complex character, wanting so desperately to be accepted and loved, to have a place to call home and people waiting for her, but she also isolates herself and struggles to let anyone in. The creatures Elayne created for this book were so cool. They're the Carabran, who are like caribou but plants grow where their hooves touch the earth. There are the marrow sheep, who eat dead bodies off the forest floor. There are wolves that blend into the scenery, and bats that use poisonous webs. But of course, my favorite creatures, or peoples, are the giants. They are tall, obviously, but willowy and lean. They have rocky or sandy skin and are devoid of hair. They're wise and are just so interesting to me. I'll definitely be drawing them in the future. I've barely touched all this book has to offer. More of my thoughts will be coming in a future video, but I also wanted to leave most of the book for you to discover on your own. To me, the best way to recommend a book is to give just a taste. I had an absolute blast working on this illustration and sharing it with you all. Thank you so much to Elayne Becker for writing one of my favorite books. Let me know if any of you guys decide to read it. And with that, let's take a look at the finished piece. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it. And thank you to Elayne for these wonderful books and all the encouragement over the last few years. I'm so excited to read anything you ever put out into the world. See you guys next time. Bye.